Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you, the internet here is not very well. So if something goes wrong with my internet, Andrea, which is also from Leste, our journal, she will replace me. Okay. So
yeah.
So let's wait for 2 more minutes, and then you can start.
Yeah, sure. What is the time on your side?
It's 1 to 9 o'clock.
9. I see. Yeah, it's quite late for you.
There in Hong Kong, it's 8 o'clock.
Yeah, we can start. Yeah, yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. So let me just say some words in Portuguese. Let me introduce you in Portuguese, and then we shift to English to the people who are already in. We expect to have some more people, and then we're gonna post this on YouTube, hopefully with Portuguese subtitles.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
yeah.
Oi, gente, pessoal que está chegando, que está vindo. Esse é o Loong Yu. Ele é um ativista de longa data de Hong Kong. Ele participou dos recentes protestos que aconteceram em Hong Kong e ele advoca pelos direitos dos trabalhadores da China e de Hong Kong e da China continental já há muito tempo. Ele é fundador do recente movimento chamado Borderless Movement, que em português significa movimento sem fronteira. Ele é um grande articulador internacional do Sudeste Asiático e internacional em prol dos direitos dos trabalhadores e da democracia na China. E ele publicou recentemente o livro China's Rise, Strength and Fragility, e acabou de publicar um livro sobre os protestos atuais de Hong Kong chamado Hong Kong in Revolt, The Protest Movement and the Future of China. So, Loong Yu, we are very happy to have you here. We strongly welcome you. It's going to be a pleasure to hear from you. So I was saying in Portuguese that you have just published the book called Hong Kong in Revolt, The Protest Movement and the Future of China. So can you start by telling us a little bit about your book and what motivated you to write it?
Yes. Actually, yes. Once the movement started in last June, I immediately noticed that it is going to be very different from the 2014 umbrella movement. Yes, because one can witness a very massive discontent, which never happened before in Hong Kong. So it is a massive revolt. One can notice that from the very beginning. It is the awakenings of the Hong Kong people because the Hong Kong people is actually for decades, because I'm old enough to say that. Yes, I am 64 now. Is an old man. So I always kind of saddening to see that my generations, or the next one, that is those who are now in the middle 40s and so on, have been so conformative, have been so lack of gut in revolting these kind of injustice imposed on us. So it's the 2014 umbrella movement is a rupture from the past, from all the past generations already. Because in 2014, yes, we saw a new generation, which I called the 1997 generation, who for the first time had the gut to to really speak out without fearing, oh, how do Beijing think about us? Yes, shouldn't we be conciliatory, so on and so forth. So it is good to see the umbrella movement 6 years ago. But still, by that time, so there is still massive support. But that kind of support had been more like kind of passive support instead of very active one. According to social surveys, one can see that the umbrella movements, which the students have been in the forefront, it always had the support of, say, 40% of public opinion. But this is not the majority. It is not yet also a very active support. But if you see if we review the last year revolt, you can see the difference is all the surveys show that the last year revolt garnered the support of at the height is more than 70%. Even when it went down, it still enjoys today is more than 60% of approval rate. So it is really the first time that we are sure that yes, the demand for democracy has huge support here in Hong Kong. And secondly, the support is no longer that kind of passive support. There is a big chunk of peoples, middle ages, old ages. They support the young people taking radical actions, not just civil disobedience, but also, when necessary, fought with the police. Therefore, one can also see that some big sections of those traditional liberal supporters now abandon the liberal parties. There are multiple parties, okay? But there are a big section of them now abandon them and supported the so-called localists. I will go further about this localism. It is very complicated things, but anyway, what counts is not just individual currents inside the movement. What counts is the huge movement last year, a movement of strong civil disobedience and occasional violence against those who against the police violence actually. So it is a movement that in 2 freeze demonstration we drew more than 2 million people taking to the streets. Highly spontaneous, and no political parties is taking lead of it. And that is a wonderful revolt in this sense. So from the very beginnings, I find it very important that I write it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So you just told us that your generation was more conformative than what we are seeing in the younger generations now. So could you tell us what are the main reasons why the new generations are more radical? What has changed since then? And also what are the reasons behind all these protests?
Well, this is also very complicated issue, so I got it to be very sketchy. I think there are the first factors is that the environments, the social environments that this generation grows up. What I call 1997. As you know, the 1997 is the year was the year that Hong Kong was handed back to China. The 1997 generations, I define it as those who born several years before or after 1997. So it's at that time, the period around the handover. It is interesting at the moment because the young people born in that era was very, very different surely from our generation, but also from those who are post 70s or even post 80s. Very different. Is that I think they born in a much more liberal situation environment. So we have been under the British colonial governments, and I grew up in a very repressive environment. Well, the British colonial government is kind of not a harsh authoritarian one, but one which is much soft. It's not because of its kind-hearted. It's just because of geopolitical reason. It is a city at the front doors of a big country, China. Yes, sir. So it is not that harsh repression, but still you can feel the repressive, not just in political, but also in culture, in daily experiences, in police violence, this kind of things. So it's and there's also a second factor, which is also important, but often overlooked by many people, is that we are also a generation that's not very political. Yeah, we try to, but some small sections become politicized, and it evolved into the liberal parties eventually. But they have been always very small. Even if they are influential, it's only because they are supported by the Western government. So it is our generation is a very political one, because we are tired of the politics of the common town KMT politics, and also the CCP's politics, because our generation has a strong feeling that, well, both the KMT and the CCP couldn't really represent Chinese, and they leave us, and they have done nothing to improve our situation under the colonial government. So we are a generation of feeling lonely, feeling left to the hands of the British colonial government, and we are generations of immigrants. Yeah, go on.
So actually, in the Brazilian media, sometimes we see that some of the protesters, they raise flags in favor of the colonial periods of the United Kingdom, when Hong Kong was under the rule of United Kingdom. So are these protesters representative? Is there a general feeling in Hong Kong society that people were living better during the United Kingdom, during the colonial time than today, or that's not true?
Well, I think yes. For a brief response to your question, because I will go to this issue again in later interviews. The general feeling, yes, there is a nostalgia of the colonial period among us, this is across the ages and across the sectors. This is what I want to bring out too. Yeah. But so this is here. It just lies the difference. the 1997 generations, because of of the liberalization since the 1980s. Yeah, once the British government has struck a deal with Beijing, so it knows that its days were numbered. So they actually, from 1980s onwards, this becomes much more liberal in many senses, and also say pass a laws on human rights, which they never did before. The Communist Party accuses the British government of being hypocritical. Yes, of course it is. It is hypocritical. Yeah, and so, but anyway, the objective result is that since 1980s there is a very strong liberalizations in Hong Kong. So the 1997 generations was born and raised in a relatively liberal environment, because even after the handover of Hong Kong, they say that in 6 years after the handover, the Beijing wanted to roll back our political freedom by introducing the national security law, but it was defeated by a mobilization of 500,000. So you see, there's we are able to keep the Hong Kong political liberties for quite a while, because we defeated it in 2003. So this generation is very, is born in a period of relative political liberties. But at the same time, they also born in great anxiety, because from the day of their birth, they have been under, bombarded by bad news day in and day out. Beijing is going to take over Hong Kong. Beijing is going to roll back all our political freedom. They are going to kill us all, And we have been demanding universal suffrage for 20 years, but we get nothing, and so on. So it is this generation is also raised in an environment of great anxiety, of disillusions about Beijing's promises of universal suffrage, so on and so forth. So these combinations of two things makes the young generations. They both, they are accustomed to speak out their mind. They are accustomed to this relative political freedom, but at the same time, they are so afraid of being taken away of this freedom that they have accumulated a lot of disillusions and anger and anxiety, which burst into great revolt first into 2014. And this is also precisely the feeling that, yes, you see pictures, people waving the British flag, but interesting is that it is mainly the young people who will do that. Middle ages and young and old people don't wave the flag, and there's a big difference here. But I will go into that later. But still,
okay.
People in the middle or old ages, they are still a kind of nostalgia. It's precisely because the Communist Party is much worse than the British colonial government. The British colonial government never forced us by law to sing their national anthem. No, I never did that. Luckily, yeah. We also defy that actually, and they don't give a shit to it, the British government. But it is Beijing who now make us to sing by law the national anthem and punish those who don't. And also, the British government will respect our language rights as Cantonese. We are Cantonese. We don't speak Mandarin, but they have been forcing us to the school to change to Mandarin as a teaching medium, and that is really nuts. So it also caused a lot of anger, and that is why there's a cross sectors, cross populations anger against the British, the Beijing, and nostalgia for the British the period.
So you've mentioned that there's a very feeling of disillusion, anger, and anxiety between among the younger generation. Is that related also to social and economic issues? Because we know from historic books that the British Empire has established a financial center in Hong Kong, which the communists took it and made it as a gateway for foreign enterprises to enter China, as well as a springboard for Chinese enterprises to go abroad. And by using this system that British Empire has created, did the CCP, did the Communist Party aggravated the social inequalities that British people had, the British Empire has created through this financial and liberal system in Hong Kong? Did you get my question?
Yes. Well, it is also true. Yes. The inequality has been rising rapidly since the 1990s, especially after the handover. In early 1990s, the Gini coefficient, the measurements for social and economic inequality, the Gini coefficients in early 1990s would be was very high still. You will have 0.45 and something like that, and then keep on increasing. But then it rises to 0.5 since the late 1990s, and it has been rising so fast. So yes, there is a rising inequalities here in Hong Kong, especially after the handover, and potentially, yes, there are economic and social reasons behind the revolt. Because, for one thing, that is also one of the things that push the young people to revolt. Because this generation, the 1997 generation, their chances for upward mobility has been narrowing and narrowing. Very different from our generations, and even also different from those who are post 70s and 80s. So they are doubly unlucky. So it is there's a great inequalities, which causes them a lot of anger as well. But this is a potential reasons behind the revolt, but that is not the key factors. Because if you look at social survey in about what factors drive people to go to the streets, one can see that the economic reasons are never the main one. Never. It is mainly the political injustice, the fear of losing freedom of speech, freedom of associations, freedom to criticize the Beijing's leaders and so on. It is this fear of political justice being lost the fear of Communist Party taking over. And then we will have the same thing like, so forced public confessions, once you are being charged, forced disappearance, which is this kind of fear of totalitarianism, so-called, that drive the peoples to such a levels of revolt. So it is this is what we must bear in mind. What is the main thing? But does that mean that it just happened naturally? Does it mean that this is the people chosen spontaneously to remain their grievances along the political line? Not necessary. This is what my book has argued. The economic issues and the social issues are always there, but the problem is they are also strong factors which has been repressing these economic factors to play a big role, at least a bigger role than it should be. The one thing that we must bear in mind that yes, firstly there is a factors of this economic prosperity as well. Hong Kong's inequality has been rising, but one must not forget that Hong Kong has been also enjoying economic prosperity so for decades. Our employment rate has been very low for decades, 3%, 4% at most. So people have the jobs are bad jobs, poorly paid jobs, but you can get jobs easily, relatively easy. That is different from many countries in the world. And also we have this city is a very so-called free market city, very social Darwinism and so on. But at the same time, actually, we must not blind to one thing as well, which is also overlooked by many outside observers, which is that we have I would say it is a semi-welfare state. More than half of our populations lives in public housing. That is a very important social stabilizers. So it is we have very few homeless relatively. So it is this, and we have accessible medical care to the extent that even some of my friends who have been immigrated to United States, when some of my friends here, when they have really serious illness, they come back to Hong Kong. They can't rely on Americans' medical care, but Hong Kong still care for them. So you can see the difference here. But as I said, things does not just happens naturally. There is also another, apart from this, economic prosperity factor. There is also a political factors that there are strong political forces inside and outside Hong Kong has been trying to divert the anger away from economic factors, away from economic grievances. Firstly, of course, the Beijing wanted. So it is Beijing is trying to blame everything on the oppositions. But secondly, there are also political forces. I mean the liberal parties. Well, or the liberal, I would say, broadly speaking, the opposition. The liberal political parties are very small. even they have lots of seats in the legislature, but that doesn't mean they are organizationally strong. They are weak. They don't have members more than 1,000 for each of them. No, very small. They don't really have consolidated basis in the community. But they have a very this is compensated. Their weakness is compensated by the existence of a big newspaper, a tabloid, which is very neoliberal. It has been at the head of the opposition. So we have a weak political parties, weak liberal political parties here, but strong media, strong opposition media. Don't forget that we are very small cities. We are population. We have 7 million, but the size of which is very small. So it is the newspapers actually play big roles in the formations of public opinions, regrettably. So it is this neoliberal tabloids. So day in and day out, shape the public opinions of the opposition into a purely political opposition, and forget all about these economic issues and economic inequalities. And this tabloid is also supported by the mainstream Western media as well. So it is this define the oppositions very much in strong degree. But surely, yes, this is we must not forget that it is the interactions, not just the media issues alone. It is the interactions of economic prosperity, of this, relative satisfactions with the status quo, even among the lower classes, and also this conscious advocacies of neoliberalism by the tabloids, by the political parties. So it has been, socially speaking, the opposition, socially speaking, has been born out of this contradiction. Politically radical, because it demands for universal suffrage. It criticized the Beijing's increasingly in strong terms, but also combined with a social conservatism that the lower classes, even if they are discontent with many things, I noticed that too, but that this discontent has never been able to voice out independently, has never been so strong that it becomes unneglectable. So that is why, yes, the economic grievances has never been strong, has never been a strong players in the movement. In many surveys during the height of the movement, social surveys also show that the economic grievances never higher than say 10%, 15% are behind these movements. Never. So yeah, that is what I think.
So this is the situation of the opposition in general, but what about the left-wing organizations in Hong Kong? Is it how the left wing managed to counter the Communist Party and to explain people that actually what we want is a socialist or communist society? How to explain people from the left perspective that we are countering the Communist Party from mainland China, but we support communism?
Well, yes, very hard. is even if you avoid the word communism, you use the word, say, socialism instead. When you
or anti-capitalist.
Yes, the moment you use it, yeah, people will joke. Yeah, look at China. You want that? Yeah. So no, it's and that is why that I would say there is an absence of the left in Hong Kong rather than existence of real left force, however small, in Hong Kong. This is and that is also why in my book I go into a little bit details about the very strange political spectrums here in Hong Kong. You know, the political spectrums here in Hong Kong is only one thing: Beijing versus Hong Kong, or despotism versus democracy. There is no left and right political spectrums here in Hong Kong. People can't think about left and right. Yeah, because avoid that. People don't like that. If there is a left wing, which means that, oh, this is socialism, that is which is really your Communist Party. So even today in the mainstream media, when you use the words left, it means Beijing. And so I'll go a little bit briefly about about the left here in Hong Kong. It's very brief, but only since in the 1970s there is a new generations because of the worldwide radicalizations of that moment. There is in the 1970s there is more young leftists, which is not Communist Party. They were anarchists, they were Trotskyists, they were broad leftists, and so on, but very small, but there are still multiple small left-wing groups in Hong Kong, and I was one of them. And but a left which is alternative to Communist Party, these leftist currents may largely died since the onset of the 1980s. We maintain a very small leftist group, but it never grows because of this, Hong Kong special political situation. We never grew, and because of the fact that we are all aging, so we have no influence at all, and there's no other until 2010. There is absolutely no other political leftist groups. There are fragments of, say, postmodernists, which was very popular at that moment, but it is the postmodernists here, or all kinds of cultural leftists. So they never claim political. They never claim to be political leftists, and they really, they are culturally speaking, active in some parts, and they sometimes do good things, but they are not politically. They are motivated at all, and so it is very different things. Since 2010, there is a small young generations of leftists, which is a good thing at that time, and we immediately supported it. But it is disintegrated in less than 5 years. So it never played anything. It never had a role in the 2014 umbrella movement, and after that, it's totally disintegrated. They are now, so of course, just very small, leftist groups, supported by some British political parties, but it was very, very small. So it is, and the old are aging, and the young is, I would say, through lack of experience, and so I don't see the left could play a role significantly in the movements in the near future. That is a sad thing to see. Without the check and balance from the left, we will see, so the localist becomes more and more right wing. That is the things that worry us.
So China, as we know, China has just approved during this pandemic, when there's a very few protests, China has approved the national security law, which strengthened China's control and repression over Hong Kong. But during this, you just said that the opposition is very much neoliberal, and the left wing has very few weights in the political spectrum. In this national security law that China has just approved, it says that one of the that China could repress political expressions that would collude with Western countries, with foreign countries, particularly with the US. Is it true then that the neoliberal and the right-wing parties from Hong Kong are colluding with foreign powers, so that China is right to go there and try to block this?
Yes, I think the first thing is, if one's follow the Hong Kong news more closely, then one will see that this is much more complicated than one think. Do not forget one thing is that back in 2014, when the umbrella movement broke out, in protest against the Beijing so-called the August 31st decision to deny us universal suffrage. And you know what? At that time, because of the strong popular protest, the liberal parties have to follow the mainstream's opposition spontaneously from the ground, see? So they have to veto the bill tabled at the legislature from the government. You know what? It was the United States government and the senators and so on, and it was the British political establishment people who tried to lobby the liberal political parties which had sits in the legislature not to veto the bill, and to try to convince them that you should take it, you should accept it. Yeah, despite so the most the movement itself has spoken, they are against it, but the the Western governments with the U.S. and the United Kingdom as its head advise the otherwise. Why? Because they always have been very conciliatory towards Beijing, especially over Hong Kong. And why is that? Because US and UK are the last people in the world want to rock the boat of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is not the Eastern Europe or Ukraine and the other parts of the former Soviet Union. No, it is not. It is silly to compare Hong Kong to, say, Ukraine, say. Yeah, it is not like that. Because, but why the US and the UK has been supportive of Beijing's rule over Hong Kong for so long? It is because Beijing recognized them as stakeholders in the Hong Kong affairs from the very beginning. It is enshrined in the basic law. The that according to the basic law, the Hong Kong peoples can keep the British passport. Hong Kong will be continue ruled by British law. It is enshrined in the basic law, and that Hong Kong civil servants could include foreigners from low to high. So we have British police officer, cracking our skulls, cracking on our skulls during the protest. A very famous one called Rupert Dover. He was a police officer, but he is a British. He still holds British passport. Is this foreign forces? So it is plain silly to say that, oh look, yes, the US and UK is intervening in Hong Kong. No, they are recognized as stakeholder in Hong Kong. And we not just police officers, we had, not right now, but we had even British politicians being the department head of the Hong Kong government here. So, come on, says the foreign forces always in Hong Kong, always recognized as stakeholders, and always collude with Beijing. They have very good relationship. Why everything's changed suddenly? It is because Beijing make a foolish move. Beijing tabled the bill, the extradition bills in 2019. If the Beijing advisors is just a bit less silly, they could just introduce a bill, but do not target foreigners. They leave the bill should leave these foreigners alone. They should just target Chinese. I'm not really, of course, advocating that, but I mean, how stupid and how arrogant and how silly the Beijing rulers becomes. So they propose a bill which includes everyone in the world. Anyone who passed through Hong Kong could also be prosecuted by Beijing, which means this will give extraterritorial power to Beijing. Why could Beijing do that? Is it really a world empire now? So it is still plain stupid, and that is what pisses off the Western powers, because they themselves feel threatened. Of course, there is one reason behind Beijing to do that, to target foreigners as well in Hong Kong, is because they want to retaliate US for arresting Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei case, right, in Canada. But it is, it is what the Chinese will joke about. Yes, no, this is, you are shooting a chicken with a big cannon. It's not necessary. So it is Beijing who make mistakes, which piss off their former allies in Hong Kong. And then that's why US and UK becomes opposing the bill. And then, so because now we come back to the so-called flag waving thing. And then because the US and the UK has opposed the bill as well, many Hong Kong young people will naturally see the US and UK as their real allies. Oh, look, they support us. And then combining with all that has happened in the past 30 or 40 years, of all the factors which I have described previously, then you can easily imagine that, okay, they have been nostalgia for the British governments. They now see the US and the UK British governments as their allies and supporting their cause and so on. So they have the young people is largely mistaken, but they, in this sense, it is also understandable in this situation.
So I would like to make the last question for you, and then we can open to the debate for about half an hour.
Yeah.
So, you know, in Brazil, we have a very strong history of American repression to our sovereignty, to our development. I would like to ask you a little different question, which is not very much related to Hong Kong, but it's related to the role that China plays in the world. What do you think about China and Brazil? Do you think that with our history of being of suffering from American imperialism, do you think that China can help Brazilian people to counter the American imperialism, to go against the American imperialism?
Well, yeah, I think, yes, I don't mean to be offending, but maybe also you knows very well too. Yeah, the Brazilian society is not a homogeneous one. It has its ruling class, it has its poor peoples in the millions. Really, it depends on which sectors of the Brazilian peoples we are talking about. If we are talking about the top ruling class, yes, surely I think China could help a bit of the Brazilian ruling class, because just look all over the world is that yes, Chinese government has been has been forging friendships with all the ruling class in all the parts of the world. They loan them money. They will fund them if these ruling class willing to support the foreign policy of the Chinese government, or they welcome Chinese overseas investment and so on. So we have seen that, but the problem is who paid the price. And here we will come across one very important thing that we need to clarify. Yes, today Chinese government is opposing the US, but it opposes it not because the Beijing is anti-imperialist. No, it is not. Because it's repeatedly stressed this, and it has repeatedly practiced this policy, namely that it supports the neoliberal globalization from the very beginning, since the 1980s. If you see, if you say for instance, you know very well Brazil is part of the BRICS countries, right? Yes. And then the BRICS, BRICS, the BRICS has a bank, which is called the New Development Bank, isn't it? And if you the New Development Bank is not countering the neoliberal global order with US as its main pillar. No, the New Development Bank and the BRICS itself actually is works with the World Bank, works with the IMF. In many projects, if you look across beyond this New Development Bank, you see, say, the Asian International Investment Bank, AIIB, or the Belt and Road initiatives. All these huge overseas projects from Beijing, they are supporting the neoliberal free trade global order. They never oppose it. Deng Xiaoping's era is the antithesis of Mao's China. Mao's China, yes, at least until 1972, actually, Yes, Mao's China is at least in appearance is opposed the U.S. imperialism in particular, but opposing imperialism in general. But I would say that it is just in appearance. That's why, you know, there is a sharp turn from Mao in 1972 and shake hands with President Nixon. And then we have China and the US establishing diplomacy and then dump Taiwan. Remember that? It's ages ago, yes, where Thomas hasn't born yet. But and then in 1979, established you know, the formal relationships with China and so on. So, and then, but Deng's era is even is a total rupture with the past in the sense that it becomes pro-imperialist. But of course, it has its hidden agenda. Very clear, but now it's not hidden. Now it's very clear that the China is opposing U.S. imperialism is because it is becoming another imperialist power. Of course, we have to be realistic that I don't think Beijing today has the ambition yet to really replace U.S. Imperialism, but it is pursuing an equal, you know, level of power on a par with the U.S. imperialism. You know, that it wants to be a world which is dominated by the U.S. and China, not just by China. Yes, it is a bit humble, but not as humble as people think. It is, so therefore, I think China is just part of this neoliberal global order. And this is going to hurt the Brazilian working people, the Brazilian peasants, and in some way also those lower middle class as well. And even some upper middle class, because it depends on which sectors, right? Some sectors, you know, so everyone knows that some sectors in the economy may still boom because of this neoliberal order, but some will go under. So I don't think in general China's overseas investment or China's overseas expansion or China's, you know, opposing American imperialism really help the Brazilians' lower classes. It's going to hurt them.
Great.
Rather.
Okay, thank you very much for answering our questions. Now we would like to open for a debate. Let's see if some other people have some question to do. Então, gente, se alguém tiver uma pergunta, pode falar em português, a gente tenta traduzir, ou vocês falam diretamente em inglês para ele, ou podem mandar via chat, que a gente pergunta para ele.
I think Deborah has written your question. She said, I would like you to comment a little more about how Hong Kong sees the Taiwan situation, if there's any sympathy for Taiwan, and how did people react in Hong Kong to Taiwan's support in the beginning of the protests?
Okay, yeah. About Taiwan, yes. Yes, there is a huge sympathy for Taiwan today in Hong Kong. That is surely because Taiwan also supported the last year revolt, and that is why, you know, so there is lots of people waving the Taiwan flags as well. The international mainstream media will like to focus on people waving the US flag and the British flag. But as a matter of fact, it is interesting to see in real protests where millions took to the street, where the young people wave flags. Actually, they wave lots of flags, Taiwan flags, the European countries' flags, and also the Catalonian flag. When last year during the movement, yes, there is also a Catalonian independence movement there, and then this is amazing to see many people waving the Catalonian flag. And there is also a rally in solidarity with the Catalonian movement as well, but it was disregarded by the mainstream media. Yes, there is a great sympathy for Taiwan, because we, the Hong Kong people, feel that both Taiwan and Hong Kong are the victims of Beijing's aggression. So we have a lot of sympathy and so on. But there's also one underlying reasons for that. It is because the Taiwan is the first Chinese place where they have a universal suffrage and a liberal parliamentary democracy. Well, as a leftist, yes, we all are critical of this mode of political representation, because it is very, very inadequate. But of course, this is a big step forward if one compared to this Orwellian state in Beijing. So it is the Hong Kong people has always been very envy of Taiwan people, because they, even the poorest persons in Taiwan, they could vote for their own president. They can vote for their own parliamentary members and so on. And therefore, there's always a good impressions about Taiwan among us. So this is a combination of immediate and underlying factors which shape Hong Kong's sympathy for Taiwan.
So, Deborah, I ask you again if you think Hong Kong's protests would see maybe Taiwan as a model, as a role model, or I don't know, an ideal to achieve.
Yes, in certain sense, yes. In certain sense, yes. Because of what I said, and also there is also a cultural reasons here. So you may say the words so-called soft powers may apply. That because since the political liberalizations in late 1980s in Taiwan, there is you may say there's a cultural boom in Taiwan. That so there is in movies, in fictions, in every ways, every aspects of the culture there, you see a flourishing phenomenon which attract Hong Kong people. Hong Kong people are quite fond of Taiwan's, say movies, although not as much as Hollywood or even the Korean movie. So yes, because of this, but there is also a contrast, because back in the 1970s, the situation would be exactly opposite. At that time, the Taiwanese people would be envy of us because they are still under one-party dictatorships with no freedom of press and so on. That's why you will see at that time there's a lot of Taiwanese tourists coming to Hong Kong, and one of the things they shop were books. Because only here in Hong Kong, so we could buy whatever books you can imagine, left, right, whatsoever. But now the situation is exactly opposite. But there's also one thing that now the young people in Hong Kong is increasingly discover, and this really goes back to what I have spoken, and Thomas has been interested in asking about inequalities and lower classes situation and so on. Because the more the younger people understand Taiwan, and now so there is a immigration flow towards Taiwan as well, or going there to study. 10 years ago, very few Hong Kong people will think of, the young people will go to Taiwan to study in colleges. But now the situation changed. But no more they know about Taiwan, then they now come to understand one thing, that, oh dear, the Taiwan's wages are so low that one could hardly earn a living there, especially in big cities with the Taiwan's wage level. So when they complain about Hong Kong wage level, they will find it horrible in Taiwan. So this is and actually in Taiwan, the good news is that in recent years there is a slow but steady growth of labor union movement there. And they are fighting against those wages. And I hope that eventually some Hong Kong young people who has been studying or working there will come to the senses that if you want democracy, you also need economic justice. You need labor movement. Just a hope.
Okay, let me see. There's one more question. When they think of democracy, do you think the youth in Hong Kong thinks first of Taiwan as a model rather than Western countries' model, for example? Like, did you understand the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
If there is a list of priorities to learn from, yeah, I think the Hong Kong people will still prioritize the U.S. and Europeans political system as their model rather than Taiwan, because for the simple fact that Taiwan also learned from them. But actually, if you go back to a bit of history, this is really very ironic that the KMT governments back in the 1930s, when they begins to write their constitution for the first time after years, they have taken power. That they decided to copy. Not U.S., not British constitution. They copy, actually, is the Nazi German's constitution, or more earlier, at most Weimar republics, or worse is the law system, the legal code. The whole legal code in Taiwan is a copy from Germany. Yeah. In the 1930s, and also the Chiang Kai-shek, the top KMT leader, is a Hitler fan. He ruled China like Hitler in the 1930s and 40s. So it's so Taiwan, even after liberalization, actually, much of their laws, still of their terrible laws are still enforced in Taiwan. So it is and I think the Taiwan's opposition, or the Taiwan's liberal parties, and some some very small leftists, they have been also concerned about this dark side of Taiwanese political and legal institution and system. So it's and there is also always debates among Taiwan that which Western countries we should look for as example. So it is this explains why the Hong Kong peoples will first look up to the U.S. and the British governments as their example rather than Taiwan, although they like Taiwan a lot.
Nice. I would like to ask you a question, one more. It's like, what are the differences, the main differences you would say, from the CCP policies towards Xinjiang's protests and Hong Kong protests, and why do you think that is? I mean, why there are, what are the differences, and why there are those differences? I don't know if you.
Yeah, you mean that what is the difference between Communist Party's policies towards Xinjiang and Hong Kong, right?
Yes, and what is different?
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
In their policies towards Xinjiang protests and towards Hong Kong protests.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's clear now that the difference now is only in degree. Previously, at least until 2019, early 2019, so before, yeah, there is still a big difference in the sense that Beijing still have to take the one country two system seriously. Beijing hates it. Beijing don't want to abide this one country two system promise that by itself. But still, given the fragile situation in Hong Kong, it has to act very carefully. Especially, Hong Kong is very powerful, not in a direct sense, not in an institutional sense, but in a sense of economics, in a sense of culture, in a sense of all the soft power here. Say, for instance, among the civil servants, from low to high, many of them, those who don't hold real power, I mean real decision power, many of them are very pro-Western government, at least sympathetic and dislike Beijing. So this is there is a strong foreign influence here, firstly, and secondly, since 2014 we have strong opposition in the city. Okay, and these two factors interact with each other, could really put Beijing's in a very unpleasant situation if Beijing went too far. Do not forget that Hong Kong is the third biggest financial center in the world, and also the main gateway for China's access to US dollars, to fund to raise funds for their governments and the state-owned enterprises. Most of the funds are for the state-owned enterprises of China, raised from Hong Kong. So, but it has to have the tacit consent from the US. You can't go on with this US dollars freely exchanging the RMB in Hong Kong. I mean, in Hong Kong, so it is only possible in Hong Kong that Beijing could do that. So That's why this has tied the hands of Beijing from the very beginning. Therefore, Beijing has been very, very harsh on the Xinjiang since 10 years back, but still not in Hong Kong. But as I said, beginning from last year, Xi Jinping has gambled and tried to demolish the one country two system by introducing the extradition bill. With the bill, it means the death of the basic law, the death of one country two system. And then, you know, so, if Beijing could bear the pain that follows, then they will treat Hong Kong the same as Xinjiang. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yes, we are doomed. Yeah, Joanne and all others, you know, and Andrea and Thomas. I don't know all your names, but yes, I'm just telling you, comrades, that yes, we are doomed in the short terms and in the medium terms. But in the long terms, yes, I am still optimistic. Yeah, I am a helpless optimist because I believe in international solidarity.
All right. Your optimism is a good inspiration for us in Brazil, because in Brazil we are not having a good time too. So
I know.
Thank you very much.
I know. Yes, I know. Yes. Brazil, India, oh, the Philippines. You have this so horrible persons now ruling all over the country. But I am a helpless optimist because you know, there is no laws of history, but I do believe there is, you know, lessons of history that the left wings always need the right wings to give them a push, and then they wake up. You know, look at the United States. You have a horrible president, and then you have a horrible killing, and then it trigger off a great, you know, BLM's protest, and it is not explicitly right left wing, but you know, so it is objectively left wing. Any great revolt, yes, from the people is against the power, the power elite, is potentially great left wings and events. So that scraps it. So yes, don't be pessimistic, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, it's all right.
All right.
You guys finishing. Yeah.
One more person asked the question. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Can I ask yet? There's one more person wrote us a question. It's Joan. He said, he's thanking you first for your explanation. Then he says, if I'm not wrong, according to the Sino-British Joint Declaration, Hong Kong's previous law system and its way of life would remain unchanged for a period of 50 years. So from the outside, at least, the PRC's movements in imposing Chinese law and teaching of standard Mandarin are earlier than expected, but not completely unexpected. Then his question is, movements for liberty in Hong Kong right now claims that Chinese pressure is against the Joint Declaration. However, from 2047, after the Joint Declaration validity, which strategy Hong Kong could use to pursue its liberty and maintain maybe independence?
I can't follow the last bit of the question. Sorry.
Okay. The question at the end was, okay, so movements for liberty in Hong Kong right now claims that Chinese pressure is against the Joint Declaration. However, from 2047, or it means like 27 years from now, after the joint declaration validity, after expired the joint declaration, which strategy, which argument do you think Hong Kong could use to pursue its liberty, its freedom, and maybe independence?
You mean Hong Kong independence?
Yeah, I don't think my audio.
Do you mean in Hong Kong?
Yeah, like he's asking. He's saying that.
Yeah.
He's saying that contemporary protests are one of the arguments is that they are basing that China is going against the joint declaration. But then after, he's saying 27 years from now, this joint declaration will be expired. And then which arguments could be used to Hong Kong to maintain its liberty?
Okay, yes. Actually, this bring us to one issue again, yeah. To Beijing's hidden motive. From the long-term interest of Beijing, yes, they this compromise with foreign has an expiry date, namely 2047. It's just 27 years away. If Beijing's rulers have a more sensible policy, they should just wait, at least for 10 years, not necessarily 27 years, but they should wait in a later period to finish us. There's no rush at all because of this expiry date, 2047. So yes, and the US and the UK governments know this very well as well. So the best options for two sides is to to have a confrontation later, and then to have a hard bargains, say, at a later date, rather than an abrupt confrontation right away. That doesn't good to anyone, even to themselves. Because as you know now, this Hong Kong extradition bill has triggered off a global contest between China and US. And China is not fully prepared for that, not at all. So, yes, this is really nonsense. It is really stupid to table this extradition bill and then turn everything upside down right now. So yes, even without this extradition bill, Hong Kong peoples do not really have a future under Beijing. No, and also very important is Hong Kong has been Beijing has been taking a lot of measures to erode Hong Kong's autonomies and political freedom in a very subtle way, under the table. Say, for instance, 30 years back, the Chinese companies' share in the market values of the Hong Kong stock market is practically zero. But now it is more. I think it's 65%. So you see, the Chinese companies has already been the major players in the stock market. In the banking sectors, it is not yet dominant, but it is increasingly powerful. And with this economic power, it can easily translate into political power. Say, for instance, the Chinese companies will make their employee to vote for pro-Beijing parties. Yeah? And they have done this openly. They don't even try to hide it. They will, you know, in a very low-profile way, but they don't mind being reported now. So, in less than 10 years, I always like to say that a few years ago, in less than 10 years, the one country system will practically dead. You know, they don't have to tear off the joint declarations or the basic law because of this. So it's why the rush? Now the picture is very, very clear. It is because Xi Jinping want to, you know, want to leave a mark in history as a great leader of the unifications of China, to do away these so-called one country two systems and make China unified. First with Hong Kong and then second with Taiwan. So finishing Hong Kong one country two system is a step towards unifying with Taiwan as well. And the difference between him and say previous ruler is that while the other rulers, Jiang Zemin or Hu Jintao, they never dare or thinking of you know, unifying Taiwan under his leadership. But probably it is what is in the minds of Xi Jinping. So that's why we have all the rush, and it is actually his personal birthmark now that this president, these rulers, what differentiates him from previous one, except the Mao, is that yes, he is as ambitious as Mao. He wants to be a great leader, not just great leader, but great leader. So that's why the rush to have Belgian rule, the rush to have of everything, the rush in Hong Kong, the rush to fight the U.S. imperialism by upgrading its technology and so on. But he is not as capable as our great chairman Mao. He is so used to overestimate his power. So in the end, he is he always end up in the bad results. Yeah. Well, of course, he's a great leader. He don't mind tactical failure. Yeah, because he has a great strategy. But increasingly, I think he is alienating many more people than he at first imagined. So I think back to Hong Kong. There's Hong Kong peoples. Hong Kong peoples. Yes, because it's just a small city. Yes, in the short and medium terms, we are doomed. Yeah, and the Hong Kong opposition has too much illusions on the U.S. government. U.S. government won't save us from this catastrophe. But on the other hand, I think precisely also because of this adventurism from Xi Jinping, he may be now also alienating lots of the Communist Party's top leaders as well. From right now, there is no clues leading to a possible open factional fight. But this is always the case under the table. I think there is lots of factional fight, you know, in China right away. And as history has taught us, I mean, Chinese history has taught us. But China, sometimes I will describe it as very rigid, very hard, impossible to move at all. but sometimes it may also look like, say, you know, say a glass structure. A reinforced glass. Yes, it is not just, you know, regular glass. It is reinforced glass, very strong, very rigid. Yeah, you know, hard to break. Huh? But still, you know, so but when it breaks, it could be very quick. The changes could come very abrupt, very sudden. We have no clues when and where and how. This is also one of the uncertainties of this kind of Orwellian state. The bright side is that, yes, it is very hard to break from inside, though. But how about from outside? And it is one different things from Mao's China, from Xi Jinping's China. In Mao's China, it stresses self-sufficiency. It stresses, yes, it was very poor, but you know, so it can feed on its own. But how about look at in China today? China is totally intervened, waved into this global economy now. We have our grain self-sufficiency goes down to only 85, 84%. But this is the official figure, actually. No one knows the real situation. There are you know, unofficial studies which show that China's grain self-sufficiency may actually go under 80% because of corruption. It is, and I believe that, yes, in general, yeah, that it is true that there is lots of corruption here. Just as the older Chinese bureaucrats will do. If there is someone who do all the investigation, you will find much of the grain storage. In the reports, the grain storage will say 90% full, but actually it may only have 50%. Or if it is a 90% full, 50% maybe. I'm just for example, 50% would be, you know, or degenerated crops because of corruption. There's widespread corruption for 2,000 years in grain storage. Mao's China, for whatever good it has done, it has also given birth again, a reborn, I would say, a reborn of this Chinese bureaucracy with all Chinese bureaucratic practices and corruptions. So we have now today that with a China so internationalized in its economy, the international aspect would be its weak point, even if it could suppress all opposition in mainland China. And here, Hong Kong also play a role here, because Hong Kong, as I said, is China's very, very important international link. You know, it is a link between China and the international market, which makes Hong Kong so important. And you finish off Hong Kong, then you will have grave consequences for China as well. And it is here Hong Kong people could play a role still, even if it is not very optimistic. But also here, this is why international solidarity is so important. Actually, the more you do it independently but enthusiastically, the more you are attacking the whole injustice neoliberal global economy, which the US and the Chinese government are a part of it. So I think in this broad strategy, then Hong Kong people are not that pessimistic.
Thank you all, Loong Yu, very much for having us here. It was a very good time. We learned a lot. If we had more time or more days, we could make so many more questions, because this issue is very important to the world. It's important for us too. But anyway, we hope we can see you again some other time. Your book, we also we just posted in our Facebook page, but we do like to discuss more about this book and to know more about the struggle in Hong Kong. I wish you all the best, and let's keep fighting.
Yeah, okay, yes. Yeah. Thank you for this, arranging this. This is hard work for you now, because it's very late now, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for your participation. It was very, very nice, this conversation. We learned a lot, as Tomaz said.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Have a good night, huh? Yeah, have a good dream as well.
Have a good day. Yeah.
In this
Have a
time of errors, yes, let us all have good dreams, okay?
Okay.
Great.
Okay, bye.
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 Bye.